Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Spivak. This is Yaakov Spivak.
And this is Zev Brenner.
And the program is Talkline, as you heard. And our guest tonight will remain anonymous for about 15 more seconds. He is the mayor of the city of New York, and he said, quote, "I don't get ulcers, I give them." Mayor Koch, give anybody any ulcers lately?
No, but I'm not so sure I'm not going to get a couple. But what I really meant by that, and it has some current relevance, and that is the following. I don't internalize. I externalize. And that means I don't allow things to be bottled up. What's on my mind is what I say, and what I think I say. And that means that I can be an activist. I'm not someone who sits doom and gloom, but rather talk about it, talk it out, and then go out and do what has to be done. And that's really what I'm talking about.
We're going to be speaking with Mayor Ed Koch from 7 to 8 tonight. You tune in, and we're going to give you a phone number to call us at 212-752-3346. Your questions, your comments, and of course the mayor has had a very boring and dull agenda for the last few weeks, and we'll try to think of something to ask him. Maybe you may have something to ask him, I don't know, but things are really going kind of, smooth these days. Anyway, we'll be back after this word from the post office. I'm Yaakov Spivak and Zev Brenner here interviewing Edward I. Koch, the mayor of the city of New York, and his new book, Politics. Infinitely readable. I guess that's the right expression to use. I want to get to this one story with your father and mother in a cab, which was the most hilarious story I ever heard. I'd like to ask you, as a survivor of politics, as someone who's a master of it, known worldwide as such, what about people's general impression of a politician? It seems to me it's terribly off. We were worried about Kennedy following the Pope, and then Judy Campbell Exner said he wasn't as a religious a man as we thought. We thought that we heard about Mondale being too far to the left, and yet he was the son of a preacher man. We hear that Ronald Reagan is supposed to be the family life and stability, and yet he was married once before. Do you believe, Mayor, that the image of the politician is far, far away from his true identity?
Well, I believe that people who are in public office at the top of their professions are very much like people who are at the top of their professions in the Fortune 500 corporations. I don't think that if you examine those people, you will find them any different than the people that you've mentioned in terms of their various styles and their lifestyles, as well as the way they dress. That's really the heart of it. These people at the top of their professions, whether in the private sector or the public sector, have a drive. There's no question about it. Have an energy. Hopefully have an intellect that got them there.
But, I mean, the public seems to read these people the opposite way of their private personas.
Well, even that it can be disputed. If you talk about, let's say, Ronald Reagan, what makes you think that if you have been divorced and you're now happily married that you're not a good family man?
No, I'm not saying that, but the image, but people might question the Mondale Reagan going at each other. Mondale's the son of a preacher man. Reagan. It just seems that the public perceives them different. What about the Kennedy aspect? We were so afraid that he was going to be under the Pope.
Well,
we knew so little about
prejudice. That was prejudice that somehow or other Jack Kennedy, President John Kennedy, the first Catholic to be president, would in some way or other not be able to exercise his own free will as president. Now, people who were supporters of him, and I was one of those supporters, and the majority of those in America said to those who were bigoted and made those false claims that they were wrong. Now, you have to understand, there is nothing wrong with a person, whether he or she be Catholic or Protestant or Jewish or Muslim or Hindu or whatever, bringing their moral values to their position of authority. I have moral values. I am a proud Jew. I think that the things that were inculcated into me by my parents from infancy on bear upon my responses. There's nothing wrong with that.
Zev?
Mr. Mayor, I think you're the preeminent Jewish political figure in the country, and I'm sure you've traveled widely. And I know, for example, you've encountered anti-Semitism in high places. You mentioned in your books Nelson Rockefeller, Jimmy Carter, among those that you've had run-ins and experiences with. Tell us a little bit about anti-Semitism in high places that you've
Well, I
encountered.
don't want to leave the impression that Nelson Rockefeller was an anti-Semite. He was not. He did have a view as it related to Israel and to Arabs, which was somewhat different than his public view, and that is in my book. But it would be wrong to think of him as an anti-Semite. You know, you can be opposed on some measures, or even totally, as it relates to support of Israel, and not be an anti-Semite. I happen to be very strongly in support of Israel, and I disagree with some of the things that the Israeli government may do from time to time, but I'm a supporter because I know that the fate of the Jews is wrapped up in the fate of Israel, the fate of the Jews all over the world.
Mr. Mayor, have you encountered anti-Semitism in high places, whether in our government or in other governments?
Well, again, you want to be very careful about it. In my book, I do mention some conversations that unfortunately I listened to as I was sitting on the floor of the House of Representatives, involving some members of Congress who didn't know I was sitting there, and it was not an attempt on my part to overhear. It was just you couldn't help it. And some of the comments that they made me feel a little uncomfortable.
Mr. Mayor, you talk about the Jewish community and its diversity. You speak about that in your book. One thing that interests me, being a mayor of New York and learning about all the different factions here, it's a real tightrope. For instance, you talk about the fact that when you were a congressman, a national Jewish women's group came to you, and you said that you were you believed in aid for parochial schools.
I do.
All right. Now I see the look. I can imagine, you know, what's coming. The question is, in the Jewish community, you probably see this as a time bomb because half the Jewish community in the yeshivas want aid for parochial school, and the other half don't. How do you deal with this?
Well,
situation?
I deal with it by using my common sense, and on matters that involve what I perceive to be matters of morality, then you can't change me, even if I'm only one in favor of a particular position. That doesn't ever happen, but on matters of morality, you cannot change me. I will vote my own morality as I perceive it. On matters where I think I have an expertise, you would have to convince me that I'm wrong. And otherwise, I will stay with my position again if I'm part of a minority. On matters that involve neither expertise, morality, or major matters, then if I'm a congressman, I would say, well, listen, if that's what the district wants, I'll be supportive of it.
You probably have a better overview of the Jewish community than anybody, in the largest Jewish community in the world. We hear that 80% of Jewish kids get no Jewish education. We hear that that there's a tremendous drop in affiliation. 3 out of 4 Jews don't belong to synagogues anymore. Don't you think, or how do you feel about the fact that strong influences in the Jewish community, such as the National Jewish Women's Group that you came up, are saying to you, as a Congressman Koch, when you were a congressman, don't vote for aid to yeshivas, and then more Jewish kids won't get an education?
Well, I'll tell you, I suspect that most of those people who came in weren't even thinking about yeshivas, because that's kind of foreign to them. They were thinking more about Christian parochial schools, because that is where most of the funding goes. And I believe that it is helpful, and I said to those women, yes, I believe it's helpful to support the competition amongst parochial, private, and public schools. And obviously I believe in the public school system, but I think it would be made better through competition. And then I took a poll amongst those women, and I said, what you're doing is you want to deny the right of moderate income people, low income people, to have any kind of tax deduction that will help them, or aid to parochial schools in some other form that will help send their kids to parochial schools and give them freedom of choice in this area, because you have the freedom, because you have the money. These were wealthy women. to do that on your own. And I said to them, and I don't remember the exact number, I said, now where do your kids go to school? And everyone who had a school-age kid had her kid in a parochial school, but it generally wasn't a Jewish parochial school. It might have been an Episcopalian. That was quite popular at that time.
How did that strike you?
Well, I said, you ought to be ashamed of yourselves. Not that your kid's in an Episcopalian school or any other school. That's your own business. But rather that you come to me and you tell me that I should be opposed to aiding in some modest way tuition for parochial schools when you're sending your kids to private or parochial schools because you can afford it.
Mayor, shifting topics a little bit, there was controversy when your first book came out, the first book being Mayor, about your remarks that you believe that blacks are basically anti-Semitic. I think your record, also reading a book, that you were one of the first to march and really to defend young blacks when it really was unfashionable. Would you agree with Roy Innes of CORE that the basic differences between Jews and also between your administration and black communities, a perception of liberal, left-leaning black leadership, but the controversy is not really with the Jewish community and black community, but between liberal, left-wing black leaders and the Jewish community, the same thing with your administration?
Just a yes or no answer, that's all.
Let me state my position and then you'll draw your own conclusions. What I have said in explanation of my various comments on the matter, and I've spoken extensively, my position is that there are some black leaders who take anti-Semitic positions. Now, obviously, there's some white leaders that do that. I have also said my problem with the black community has never been with the black community, but rather with a limited number of black leaders who don't really represent the community that they serve in major areas where the community, when polled, takes a diametrically opposite view on major matters. For example, when polled, the black community is against racial quotas, preferential treatment, and the black leadership that's militant and the one that I am referring to now, those in that category, they are for racial quotas. They make no bones about it. Sometimes they disguise it by saying they are for goals, timetables, and sanctions, which is a synonym for racial quotas, but they think it goes down better. It doesn't go down better. It's exactly the same. But the black community is opposed to it, just as the white community is opposed to racial quotas. Some of those same black leaders are, for example, against the death penalty, but a majority of the blacks are for the death penalty, just as a majority of the whites are for the death penalty. Similarly, on compulsory busing, a majority of the black community is against school busing. They want their kids to go to local schools, but the more militant black leader is for compulsory busing.
So basically, the average black is more conservative than his representative.
No question about it.
Mr. Mayor, concerning the issue of of the Manus case, which we've gone 15 minutes and not talked about, should we go another 15 minutes?
No,
and
I'm
not talk
happy
about
to respond.
All right. What is the New York Magazine had a whole article about that and said that your quick condemnation of Manus was for you to, quote, distance yourself from the affair.
Yeah, let me talk about that. You know, there are two aspects as it relates to the comments made. One one comment that my reaction in which I referred to his being, as I put it, a crook, violating his oath of office and engaging in extortion, and that I believed the charges that were made by Michael Dowd, a lawyer who has been given immunity by the U.S. Attorney, so he believes him, and it was Michael Dowd who made those allegations. I was trying, say some people, to distance myself because I'd been so supportive of Donnie Manus. Now, Donnie Manus is a friend of mine for more than 20 years, and when he was found on the road with his wrist slashed and taken to the hospital, the cops called me, and I rushed there at 3:30 in the morning, and I saw him in the emergency room, and he needed blood. I offered my blood. They didn't need my blood, and he had lost a lot of blood. I said when there were rumors as to why that incident had occurred, and some said he might have been with a hooker. Others said that he might have attempted suicide. And Donnie Manis said no, he had been kidnapped. You may remember.
that, yeah.
I said, listen, whatever it was, if you just tell the truth and it doesn't involve corruption, because the public will never forgive corruption. If it doesn't involve corruption, then nobody will care. Just tell the truth.
We're going to have to go against the court of public opinion, as you call it, right now and break for a commercial. The court of public opinion would rather hear you talk, but we have to break for a moment. Yaakov Spivak along with Zev Brenner. You're listening to Talk Line, and we will be back after these messages. Boy, I feel like the Lone Ranger. And now, return with us now to those thrilling days of yesteryear. Mr. Mayor, you had a, we cut you off in the middle. I think
just
that's a
finish the
great,
answer.
I think I'm the first journalist to ever do that. But,
Now, let me just finish this answer, in which, to be complete, as to have the following. I then learned, as a result of a Daily News article, after I visited the borough president second time in the hospital, that this lawyer had denounced him for having extorted $36,000 from him, and I believe it. And my anger was so great that I had been abused by a friend that I spoke out in the most denunciatory terms. Now, if it hadn't been a friend, I probably wouldn't have done it, simply because I felt violated. I felt assaulted. I felt that every single civil servant and public official had been besmirched by this action. Now, my sister said, why did you do it? And I explained it to her. Now, maybe I could have been more artful, but the anger within me wouldn't permit it.
Mr. Mayor, you called him a crook, and I want to know if the media is being fair. They came down very heavily on you for calling Donald Manis a crook, and yet at the same token they expect you to call Stanley Friedman a crook. Can you explain to the economy why the media...
Well, the first matter is that there is nothing that I know that Stanley Friedman has done that is illegal. We did cancel his contract, but only because he failed to keep the contractual terms his firm did. But I am not aware of any illegality on his part. I am aware of illegality charged against Donald Manis, and I have so stated.
But it just seems strange that the media is harping. On one hand, they're
Well,
giving you a hard time for calling Manis a crook, and they say, why don't you call Friedman a crook?
I have enough source without attacking the media tonight.
there's something, Mr. Mayor, very deja vu about this whole scenario.
Yeah.
Will we see Donald Manis get up and say, well, I'm not a crook, and you won't have Donald Manis to kick around anymore?
Well, I think what's interesting is that Donald Manis has had an opportunity to deny the charges, and he's never denied them. Never denied them. And I believe that supports my contention that, in fact, they are true.
The old Talmudic dictum, shtika kehodaya, if you're quiet, that means you assent to what's been said to you.
I believe that if you're charged with criminality and you have an opportunity to say that you didn't do it, that it's incumbent upon you to so state if you're a public official.
We're going to take phone calls now, 212-752-3346, and we will take this now. You're on the air. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from New York City.
Yes.
Can I speak to the mayor, please?
The mayor's
Speaking.
right here.
Good evening, Mayor Koch.
Yes.
I am an employee of the Department of Social Services. Hello?
Yes.
Go ahead, Carl.
And I'd like to speak about affirmative action.
Yes.
When I started 9 years ago, the ratio was 40% white. I'm sorry, 40% minority, 60% white. 9 years later, the ratio is 80, 90, 95% minorities.
Aren't most of these people who have taken civil service tests?
I don't know, many provisionals and some civil service tests, many provisionals.
Well, I don't know how many provisionals, but it has to be a small part, and everybody who takes a civil service test has to pass it. We have no preferential treatment based on race, religion, or sex.
Evidently, behind your back, there is.
You're wrong.
I can give you, sir, departments, the addresses, There's 80, 90%
I'll tell you what to
minorities.
do. The fact that they're 80 to 90% minority has no bearing on it. Yeah, the question is, did they come through civil service? If they came through civil service, then there cannot possibly be any quota or preferential treatment based on race, religion, or sex.
Civil service, sir, are taken by old people.
Sir, my caller, in all due respect, we want to give you made your point. The mayor will consider it, put it in his pocket, and think
Okay,
about. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your call. Staten Island, you're on the air. Go ahead, please. Richard from Staten Island, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, good evening. Yeah, I'm from Staten Island. Like many Staten Islanders, I'm very concerned, especially in view of the tragic accident of the Challenger space shuttle, about the strong possibility that we're going to have nuclear weapons here, taking into account so much terrorism in the world today, the possibility of sabotage.
What's that got to do?
Guarantees there are?
What's that got to do with the space shuttle? There were no nuclear weapons on the
No,
space
it
shuttle.
shows how technology has never failed safe. You know, they tell us it's going to be safe, but we're never that sure. You know,
What you're not aware of is that 10 miles from New York City, in the city of Early, New Jersey, there is one of the largest stockpiles of nuclear weapons, and if they were to explode, you would have a problem. If there were to be a Third World War, that would be the place that the Soviets, if they were the ones who were sending their missiles, would send them to, and you, in New York City, would have a problem.
Thank you for your call. We now go to Borough Park. Moshe, you're on the air.
Moshe, let me hear it.
dumb cocks.
Okay.
I apologize, Mr.
No,
Mayor,
I don't
for
mind. I mean, it's America.
Yeah, it's America. All right, fine. I think I might have. All right, let's try another one. Have we got another one? Our crack screener. That's it for the time. Can we talk about?
By the way, when he says dumb cotch, you know, I got 78% of the vote. And I got 81% amongst the Hispanics. I got 74% amongst the blacks. And I got about 78% amongst the whites. And you know, the people that I do the best with are not the Jews. I do my best with the Irish and with the Italians.
Why do you think that is so, Mr. Mayor?
Well,
I'll tell you. I know.
Why? I don't know why. You'll have to tell me why.
Well, you don't ask anybody how am I doing anymore. I can tell you what I hear from the people.
What do you
all
hear?
around. They hear that Koch. He speaks out and he says exactly what's on his mind. He ain't afraid of nobody.
That's good.
And it's fantastic that people. I mean, the guts that you can do that, but it doesn't always work. Telling it, Howard Cosell tried telling it like it is, and he lost his job at ABC, and yet you're still the mayor and still popular. What? I mean, how were you able to get away with it? Why wasn't anybody as smart as Ed Koch up to now?
Well, I don't
to do
know
it
that I'm smarter than anybody else. I think I have reasonable intelligence. I don't want to tell you I'm not reasonably intelligent. I have great common sense. And that means that people know that what I do, even if they don't agree with everything that I do, you'd have to be crazy to agree with everything I do, because I represent 7.5 million people. They have different needs, different concerns. But on balance, if you look at the things that I do, most people would conclude that they would do it the same way. Imagine in my third term, running for a third term, to get 78% of the votes, the highest in the history of the city of New York. Now, I don't know whether I can get 78% today. Who knows? I don't have to get it today. When I run for a fourth term is when I have to increase the vote.
What about the number that 60 Minutes tried to do on you Sunday night?
Well, it was interesting about that. This is on the homeless. I can't complain about the program, because whatever anyone would do as it relates to the homeless, unless you took a lot of time and you wanted to be totally fair about it, you would come out with a program like 60 Minutes, which says, isn't it outrageous, and it is, that we spend so much money on housing welfare families in hotels. Yeah, but what they didn't say was that we have no place else to put them, because we have a 2% vacancy rate, and what we pay per person on the average in a hotel is $15 a night. Now, if you have an average family of a woman with 3 children, $15 a night, that's $60 a night, and because they're all in the same room. If you multiply that by 7 nights, that's $420. And if you multiply that by 4 weeks, it's over $1,600, and that's how you get to that large amount. Now, I defy anyone in America to come to New York City and get a room that rents for $15 a night in a commercial hotel.
Wow.
We're going to take some calls now, 752-3346. Yaakov Spivak along with Zeb Brenner. Yes, you're on the air. Where are you calling
New York
from?
City, go ahead.
Yes, this is Mark from Manhattan.
Yeah.
I want to speak to the mayor about the Manis case. I just want to say I thought he handled it extremely poorly, and he came off as being very two-faced because on one hand, the public was given a picture of Mr. Koch being very supportive of Mr. Manis, and then the day later, boom, when public sentiment turns against Mr. Manis, the mayor just rides that wave of public sentiment and condemns him.
Okay, let me respond. Firstly, I don't see public sentiment changing. What I did was to go out and support my friend when he attempted suicide for what he said was a personal reason. And at the time that I discussed the matter publicly, I said anybody can commit an infirmity so long as it doesn't involve corruption. The public will never forgive corruption. That's me. I'm part of that public. I'm the mayor who has been elected to protect that public. And when it subsequently became known that he had actually engaged in corruption, I denounced him. Now, you know, I apply the same standard to people, whether you're my friend or someone I don't know. And why then should I not denounce someone even tougher who has betrayed me personally, the public, which is more important, by being corrupt and fooling us all?
Mr. Mayor, has this whole escapade with Manis and the scandals that have come since then, has that changed your style of how you look at politicians and how different deputies and different governmental institutions will be hiring? Are you going to take a more hands-on approach in government?
I have a hands-on approach as it relates to management, but let me get to the heart of what you're raising. My style of government has been and will continue to be the following: that I hire the commissioners, I hire the deputy commissioners in many cases, not in all, and then I say to the commissioner, you hire and fire anybody you want to where the law doesn't require civil service. There are about 3,000 positions in government, managerial positions for the most part, and those are not civil service. Now, I believe that's given me the better commissioners, in some cases the best commissioners, because they want to be challenged to do their best, whereas in prior administrations they were told who to hire. I have said to them, so long as you don't discriminate based on race, religion, or sex, or sexual orientation, so long as you don't discriminate, I won't tell you who to hire. If I find that you discriminate, I'll fire you if you're doing it willfully. If you're doing it by error, we'll give you a chance to correct it. Now, as a result of the scandal, and by the way, the scandal, thus far there's been one person arrested, to the best of my knowledge. One person at the PVB.
But are they looking at, I believe, 7 other individuals?
They're looking at 11 agencies that contract out to see whether or not there is any corruption. But they don't allege corruption at this moment. It may be they will find it, but the headline says 11 city agencies under subpoena. Not that they're alleging corruption, but they want the records to see if there is any corruption. So just to finish, what they then said to me is, well, why don't you change your position, and why don't you now hire? And I said, I'm not going to do it. I will not keep the commissioners on a short leash, but what I will do is I'll post-audit. I'm going to go back at the end of 3 months or 4 months after the person's been hired and find out how the decision was made. How many people did they consider for the job? Who were the references? Were they all political? Are all the people hired in that particular department only those sent by political people? There's nothing wrong with political people sending in people, but the commissioner should take the best person without regard to the reference.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Talkline. Yaakov Spivak along with Zeb Brenner. Our guest is Ed Koch, Mayor of the City of New York. You can talk to him. You don't have to walk through an official now or knock on a door. All you have to do is dial a number, 212. So you didn't like that, Mr. Mayor? Is this
I did. No, it's fine.
752-3346 is our number. There are a few other things that we want to talk about, and we'll be back after this.
Hi, this is Ed Koch, and I'm talking to you from Talkline. And Talkline is conducted by Yaakov Spivak and Zev Brenner, and they hold fourth on WNWK, which is 105.9 FM on your dial. I've been on their program. It's a hell of a program.
Welcome back. Yaakov Spivak here with Zev Brenner. Our guest is Mayor Koch. And Mr. Mayor, I want to bring up the Dr. Judith Piesco case. Everybody and a lot of her people have been saying that the people she worked with, that she was difficult to work with. Now, I bar mitzvah Judy Piesco's son. And you know how the mother of the bar mitzvah can be tough. I found her easy to work with. Any particular problem?
I never worked with her, so
Yeah.
I cannot make comments as it relates to that. There is a lawsuit going on. She is charging that she was fired unfairly by the then commissioner, Juan Ortiz, and he believes that he was fair in his firing. A judge will make that decision.
All right, we're going to take some calls. We're calling Avi. Avi, are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Where are you calling from, Avi?
I'm calling from Brooklyn.
Brooklyn. Where about Brooklyn?
In the Borough Park section.
Okay.
I'd like to ask the mayor a question.
Yeah.
On another subject, if I may.
Yeah.
First of all, I do think he's doing a great job, and I do hope that he realizes that among the Jews, he has a very good rating.
I hope so.
Second of all, I'd like to know his ideas on the Israelis that they brought down the Libyan commercial jets. Does he feel that it will hurt the image of the Jews as a whole? And if it does hurt the image, will it hurt us at home here in New York?
A, I don't think it hurts anybody's image. B, I'm sorry that they didn't capture some terrorist. And C, they should try again.
Then the question that comes up, Mr. Mayor, which is very... I'm afraid I'm going to go to an area which you may not want to answer me. Obviously, Gaddafi says he's going to send terrorists on the streets of New York. You, as the mayor of this city, I mean, with its large Jewish population, and do you give that consideration? Are you worried about that?
Well,
What's the story?
You know, we have been relatively free from terrorism. And we've had some bombings, but very few compared with other cities around the world. And I think it frankly comes as a result of the United Nations being here in New York City, and many of these countries that engage in or support terrorism, like Libya, want to not be thrown out, so to speak, of the community of nations by engaging in that kind of terrorism. And therefore, I'm hopeful that they won't try it. But we have the best police force in the world, the finest police department, and I leave all issues relating to law enforcement and police protection to the commissioner, and I have confidence in him.
Well, is there, like we see in the movies, a scenario where the mayor has to man a command post or somebody? That's no, that doesn't exist, huh?
It is true that I go to the hospitals when a police officer has been injured, and I go and have gone from the day I was mayor because I feel a bond. The shooting of a cop to me and the killing of a cop is one of the grossest, greatest crimes imaginable, because it's not simply that individual who has been shot or killed. It is a blow against all of society. They are that thin blue line that protects us from onslaught. And nevertheless, even though I do that to show my solidarity with the police department and my commiseration with the spouses who come to the hospital, I don't go to incidents like a bank has been held up. I don't rush to that bank, or some other incidents. I just don't do that. I leave that to the cops.
But what about the mayor as spiritual cheerleader of the city, of the area? I refer to Hurricane Gloria. I was scared to death, and you looked into the television out of my screen and said, not to worry, everything was all right. Tell me the truth, Mayor. You were worried. You were damn worried. Come on.
I think my comment at the time was I scared the hell out of, I think it was New York City.
Yes.
We scared the hell out of Hurricane Gloria, so she went away.
Don't you think that was irresponsible, getting in the car with police commissioner and running around trying to take old ladies out of houses? You could have been... They said an A-bomb was coming. That's the way Chuck Scarborough said it on Channel 4. You walked in the middle of a hydrogen explosion.
Well, I thought that in times of stress, I want to be out there helping, comforting, particularly those who need help. And in a snowstorm, in a hurricane, I would be out in the streets and seeking to help.
All right. Alex, where are you calling from?
Yes, I'm calling Cornell 5th and 59.
We don't need the coordinates, Alex. We're not going to bomb you. We don't need a spare. Just give me a general area.
Okay, 5th Avenue and 59.
Okay, fine.
Close enough.
You'll know where to get him in case he says something you don't like.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yes, Mayor Koch,
Yes.
I would like to congratulate you on this marvelous work that you're doing for New York City.
Oh, thank you.
I've been here for about 20 years.
Where are you from, sir?
I'm from Haiti.
Yeah, things are pretty tough down there, huh, Alex, right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I hope someday I'll be able to invite you to come to Haiti.
When it's free. Papa Doc is gone, and then it will be free.
Yes. And I would like to congratulate you again on this marvelous
Thank you very
job.
much, sir.
Thank you for your call. We now go to Bill, bottom line, and you're on the air. Go ahead, Bill.
Bill.
Yes, how are you? Mayor,
Okay.
Yes, Bill.
congratulations on your third term.
Thank you.
I ride the B line every day,
Yes.
and the conditions on the trains are really very, very bad.
What's wrong?
First of all, the trains are really filthy. In addition to that, a lot of mechanical problems, such as doors not opening and windows being knocked
Okay, I'll
out.
tell you what to do. Because obviously I'm not in charge of the trains and I can't fix the B line myself.
Right.
But if you send me a letter giving me a week summation from Monday to Friday and keeping the times and the problems, it would be very helpful because I will give that personally to David Gunn, who is the Chief Operating Officer of the Transit Authority, and maybe we can get some help for you.
Mr. Mayor,
Send it to me at City Hall.
is there a negative correlation between the conditions of the subway and the freedom of the people? In Moscow, the subways are spotless.
Well, you could say that there's also very little crime in the Soviet Union or in China. They execute people for stealing. I am for the death penalty, but I'm not for
Not that
the
far.
death penalty that executes for stealing.
Yeah.
I am for the death penalty for those who engage in murder, and particular kinds of murder. Willful murder with torture, multiple murder, murder of a prison guard, murder of a police officer, etc. So, yes, there's less crime. There was less crime in Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union because the whole state's a criminal state. Nazi Germany was a criminal state. The Soviet Union is a criminal state. The good people are in jail.
Yeah, in Saudi Arabia, I'm told that that's part of the anatomy which has offended Allah. If you stole, they cut your hand. If you slammed, they cut off your tongue. That part of the anatomy is removed. Adultery is not really a problem over there anymore.
Now we're going to go to Williamsburg. Zev, you're on the air with the mayor.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I'm calling from Williamsburg, as you're not the most favorite person. A couple of months ago, I believe you initiated a study about housing. How come there's not enough housing built in the city? We here in Williamsburg have got blocks upon blocks, vacant land, just collecting garbage, doing nothing. And we want to like to build housing. We don't need any money from the city. All we need is to get the red tape out of there, the ULIP procedures and all that other nonsense. Let us go ahead and build housing. How can that be done?
Well, the first thing is, I don't know whether I'm popular or I'm unpopular, and it really makes no difference, does it? Because I was re-elected with 78% of the vote, so if I wasn't popular on your block, what can I do? Now, the reason I probably wasn't popular on your block is that your block doesn't like the resource recovery plant that's going into the Brooklyn Navy Yard.
Well, that's your mistake.
Say yes or no.
No.
No?
No.
What's the other reason?
The housing problem.
Well, there I
There's
must...
always a problem. That's not the major problem. Major problem is we have large families here, 7 and 8 kids, people living on top floors, 3 or 4 rooms. It's simply unbearable. And we got blocks upon blocks, and you know
Well, I
it.
must,
When we got vacant land, and we're trying to build housing, and we got a problem. I
Well-
don't know what the problem is, but it is a problem.
Well, we're doing the best we can. I'm not terribly
that good
sympathetic.
enough?
I'm not terribly sympathetic to you.
Can I ask you a question, caller?
Yeah.
Did you vote for 11?
Fifth Amendment.
Fifth Amendment.
It doesn't make a difference. I'm not terribly sympathetic
Well, yeah,
to you. You have to understand, there is equality of effort in this city, whether you live in Williamsburg, whether you're Jewish or black or Hispanic or Asian or Irish or Italian, and the fact that you voted for me or didn't vote for me has nothing to do with whether you get effective services. But I want to tell you, I'm not crazy about your tone of voice.
Caller, thank you so much. We're speaking with Mayor Ed Koch. We're going to be right back with some more of your phone calls. Zev Brenner, Lord Rabbi Yaakov Spivak. Just a reminder, you can tune us in every Wednesday and Thursday night at 7 p.m., Saturday and Sunday nights at midnight here over 105.9 FM.
Welcome back, and Zev, you have some questions.
Yes, Mayor, getting back to Jimmy Carter, in your book, in both books, Politics and Mayor, you mentioned that Jimmy Carter and your relationship was pretty rocky, that you oppose him in his anti-Israel statements. You mentioned in your book that Jimmy Carter himself told you that you have done more, Koch, to hurt his political career than any man alive, and I'm going to remember that. In the book, Koch, former City Hall reporters quote the George Carter, Republican leader, that had Jimmy Carter been reelected, you were afraid, and let me read you a quote. I didn't want to see my body floating in the East River, and I thought some hitman will get me, or the CIA will find me, or the FBI.
A master of subtlety, Mr. Mayor.
That never happened.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that for the record.
That's easy to deal with that question like that. Go ahead.
We now go to Long Island, number 2, and you're on the air with the mayor.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to thank you, first of all, very much for your constant, unceasing support of Israel.
Thank you.
And particularly would like to, I thought it was very courageous of you when you went to Lebanon a year or two ago, and even though the Lebanese government didn't like it, the way you went in. I'd like to ask you, sir, why it is that when you became mayor, after you came into office, until that time, there had been a permanent police car stationed in front of the Lubavitcher Rebbe in Crown Heights in Brooklyn.
Okay, let me do a fast story, which appears in my book, Politics, but I can't do the whole story because it would take about 15 minutes. But the long and the short of it is that in 1966 or so, John Lindsay put a police car in front of 770 Eastern Parkway, which is where the Lubavitcher headquarters is, because there was tension between the Satmar and the Lubavitcher.
Even that far back?
Yes. And then in 1977, A. Beam put a second police car in front of the Rebbe's home.
So they expected you to come in with a helicopter.
Well, I don't want to get into that, but when I asked the police commissioner to examine whether or not these two police cars were needed for protection purposes, the police commissioner, Bob McGuire, said absolutely not, that they were placed there for political reasons, ultimately. It may be that they were needed on the first occasion when there was tension, but that quickly ended, and the police cars should be withdrawn. I have never overruled the police commissioner, and therefore those police cars were withdrawn. Now, they're still in the neighborhood, but they now move, and they move around the neighborhood, so everybody in that neighborhood, whether they're Lubavitcher or whether they're black churches, which are in that neighborhood, or Hispanic Pentecostal churches, they all get the same kind of coverage now.
Mr. Mayor, there was some talk a number of years ago of perhaps, since you are the preeminent Jewish political figure in the country, that perhaps we'd see you as the first Jewish vice president. Obviously, I think you've made several speeches. You're committed to being mayor.
Well, I once tried, to run for governor, and I lost. Yeah. And I learned a lesson, and it was right that I lost, because while I think I would have been a very good governor, because I think I have the talent to be, nevertheless, the people decided that Mario Cuomo would be a very good governor, and that I would continue to be a very good mayor.
Do you have any other ambitions?
None at all. Since that time, Mario Cuomo has said he'll never run for mayor again, and I've said I'll never run for governor
Just
again.
one follow-up question, Mr. Mayor. In New York Magazine, they report, and this is before, obviously, the Donald Mannis scandal, that you mentioned that Mannis would make a good mayor. I would assume that you thought before the scandal that he would take on your position.
Yes, I thought he was a great friend of mine for more than 20 years, very talented, very intelligent, very able, and I thought he might very well be the next mayor.
When you were running for the possibility of running for president, it was thought with you as a governor of using the governor as a base. You were going to. People said you were going to run for president of the United States.
I never said that.
Well, people said it. People said that.
Yeah.
What about the old Jewish saw that it wouldn't be good to have a Jewish president because if things went wrong, pogroms would break out?
Well, they said the same thing about being a Jewish mayor. and that's
No, there was
shtetl talk.
president, but that was shtetl talk, but that was
Yeah.
precedent. You had people.
I was never running for president. I was never a candidate for president or vice president. And the talk as it relates to any Jew running for a high office, there will always be some Jews who say, that's not for us. I believe it's for us like for anybody else. And I'm not a Jewish mayor. I'm a mayor who's Jewish. There's a big difference.
So you would have no
I treat
problem.
all people the same.
You would have no problem with the scenario of a mayor, of a president of the United States who was Jewish.
I would have no problem at all. It should only happen someday.
I thank you very much, Mr.
And
Mayor.
we hope to have you on again in the very near future.
And this program will be broadcast on Manhattan Cable. He will be able to see the mayor
And Channel 68.
as he looks at our ridiculous questions and cringes at them, which he didn't really do. But and you will also see it on Channel 68. So for Zev Brenner, this is Yaakov Spivak, and for our mayor saying Seid gesund, lihitraod, shalom al Yisrael, and most of all, my friend Chazak. This is WNWK FM Stereo.